It was about 1990 years ago, on a weekend in the city of Jerusalem, the same Jerusalem that's in our news today, that the disciples, the followers of Jesus, were filled with sadness and sorrow. 2 days ago, the Lord they loved had been nailed to the cross as a criminal at the foot of a hill called Golgotha. And while he was on the cross, the crowd mocked him and said, "If you're the Son of God, why don't you come down from the cross? If you're the Son of God, you could do it. Just get down from the cross." But Jesus stayed on the cross to carry our sins and to carry our rebellion, to carry our transgressions, to carry the fact that we needed to be put in a right relationship with God. Was on the cross for about 3 hours. At the end of the 3 hours, he cried out with the last bit of energy he had, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And then his last words were, "It is finished." Old English says he gave up the ghost. We would just say he breathed his last and he died. Two rather wealthy men in the city of Jerusalem, one of them Joseph of Arimathea, the other named Nicodemus, got together, arranged to take his body off the cross and have him buried in a tomb. Joseph of Arimathea was a wealthy man, owned a garden about a city block away from where the cross had been, had a tomb in it that had never been used, and took Jesus, buried him in the tomb. They sealed the tomb up really, really good because they wanted to make sure nobody got in there. The disciples had believed that he was going to rise on the third day, and they didn't want a bigger problem on their hands where his body disappeared. So they sealed the tomb and they set a Roman guard around the tomb. Roman guard is guarding the tomb all day Saturday. All day Saturday and Sunday morning, Mary Magdalene, one of the followers of Jesus, and a couple of other ladies went with her, made the way to the tomb. They wanted to just be there. They're walking towards the tomb, and as they're arriving at the tomb, it's early dawn, the sun is just about to rise. They're walking towards the tomb, and there's two men there, and they're glowing, and the stone's been rolled away, and they say to Mary, "He's not here. He's risen." Just like he said it. And Mary turned around as quick as she could and just walked back to the city of Jerusalem and said to all the disciples, "Jesus is not at the tomb. He's gone." And there were men there saying he's risen. Most of the disciples thought it was a bunch of rubbish, but Peter and John had to go check it out for themselves. And Peter and John set themselves a running, and they arrived at the tomb, and they looked inside, and all that was in the tomb were strips of cloth. Jesus was not there. Jesus was risen. Peter and John are guys, so when they saw that Jesus wasn't there, they said, Jesus isn't there. And they went back to the city of Jerusalem, but Mary's a lady. She needs to process it a little while. And she stays at the tomb, and she's crying and weeping. And a man comes up to her and says, "Why are you crying?" Mary thought this man was the gardener, and she said, "Haven't you heard? Jesus was buried and his body's gone. Do you know where his body is?" And the gardener looked at her and said, "Mary." And when Mary heard her name, she looked up and she recognized him, and it was Jesus. And she wanted to give Jesus a hug. Jesus said, don't do that. Just go back and tell the disciples that I'm alive, that I've risen from the dead. That's the Easter story.